That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is bureaucrats illegally maneuvering to alter the vote, to alter how votes were counted. That is an enormous, enormous problem. So the Democrats do want people to vote without ID. They want people to show ID for almost everything else. Why, while we still have a minute or two left here, why is it that they want they don't want actual election security? Why is that?
I think that the main reason that they don't want actual election security is because they don't, deep down, they don't mind winning elections by not necessarily widespread fraud, but at the very least questionable measures. You know, we talk about mail-in voting, ballot drop boxes, things like that, things that aren't. When you think about voter fraud, you think about someone just completely lying about who they are or something like that. It's not always that cut and dry. I think it's more kind of those gray areas that they want to embrace because they know that it benefits them. And that sounds terrible to say, but
no, it doesn't.
That's what they're showing us.
It doesn't sound terrible to say. It sounds like the truth. I think they do count on it. If you want a case and study, folks, go look at California in 2018. Look at how Republicans got routed in California in 2018. The reason they got routed in 2018 is not because people in California all of a sudden decided to change their minds. It is because California allowed them to do ballot harvesting, allowed them to do all kinds of stuff that all of a sudden, because of COVID was so freaking convenient in 2020, all of a sudden other Democrat state leaders, executives, and bureaucrats allowed across the country. They allowed enormous amounts of mail-in voting. They allowed ballot harvesting. They allowed people to turn in ballots who were not responsible for the ballots. I mean, we've got cases all over the country where there were ballots that were turned in without signatures. And if you look at the Arizona audit right now, you know, they are finding that originally the people working the polls, when they would compare a signature on an envelope to the voter signature, they would compare it across 20 points. But then they got behind, so they started using 10 points, and then they used 5 points, and then, I kid you not, 1 point, and then 0 points. They just didn't compare. That's the claim that's being made. That's why California shifted, and I really think when we talk about widespread voter fraud, folks, we're not talking about people stuffing ballot boxes. Now, maybe that happened. I don't know. I wasn't at every poll. What we are talking about is systematic abuse of very lax rules that Democrat and liberal executives and bureaucrats put in place illegally and unconstitutionally. The Constitution vests that responsibility in state legislatures. State legislatures did not, with I think a couple of exceptions, state legislatures did not rule on this. The executives just decided, oh, we're going to change the rules. That is illegal.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time here for this segment, so I'll wrap it up quickly. But I think
my fault. Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. I think that that's a great point that you make, is that people, they think that because we've debunked this idea of stuffing ballot boxes, or we've debunked, for example, this video that came out in Georgia that I'm sure we all remember, of some suspicious briefcases being wheeled out, and apparently that video got debunked, and so that means that there's no voter fraud
anywhere. At any time in history.
That's just not the case. Like, just because it's not a blatant stuffing of a ballot box or a false name or someone who's dead voting, which we did see those things too, just because those things aren't the main problem doesn't mean that there's not voter fraud on some scale, or at least some sort of systemic abuse of the system, like you said, by state legislators who don't have the authority to do so, but they did it anyway. So
illegal. And to the extent that it's illegal, it's fraudulent. So when you hear when you hear the media equate election fraud with this idea, oh, there were people in black hats and twirly mustaches in the back room stuffing ballot boxes, that's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is bureaucrats illegally maneuvering to alter the vote, to alter how votes were counted. That is an enormous, enormous problem. So the Democrats do want people to vote without ID. They want people to show ID for almost everything else.